Welcome back to Case Studies with the Biz Doc. This week it's GoPro and what happened to GoPro. I'm going to cover 4 things: a little history, a little enthusiasm around the IPO, what's happening today, and why I think it happened. And there's lessons in that for you and me, whether we're running, as I like to say, a little t-shirt company downtown, or we're running something large like a consumer electronics technology company like GoPro. So let's dive in. It starts with Nick Woodman in 2002 going to Australia. He would become the founder of GoPro. He goes down to Australia and he wants to take really great surfing pictures. But from where he is on the beach and with the regular consumer equipment like you and I would buy at a photo store, he only can get certain level of quality. He wants to be close to the action and get great, amazing pictures like you would see in surf magazines. Well, guess what? The professionals are out there with these big, expensive cameras in these expensive water boxes and stuff, and they got jet skis towing them around and dive tanks, and that's just expensive. And that was the dream. Wouldn't it be great if a simple consumer like you and me could go pro and get professional quality pictures off affordable equipment? And that little thought was the dream for GoPro. In 2002, he starts saving his pennies. Believe it or not, he was selling beads and belts and things made of shells out of a Volkswagen microbus. That's not an Android logo. I tried to draw a Volkswagen microbus, so I get an F for art. But there he is with that, and then he gets about $250,000, right around $250,000 from his parents. And so he truly bootstrapped like most entrepreneurs, saved some money from friends, and in this case family, and away he goes. In 2004, the very first GoPro camera comes out, but it's got film. It's a little 35 millimeter, well, very old school, but that's where it all started. However, 2 years later, in 2006, the first Hero digital camera comes out. So 2005, the sales was about 150,000, so he was selling something to somebody. By 2006, it goes up to 800,000, and then it's 3.4 million in 2007, and the Hero Digital is off and running. And this enters in what we call the golden era for GoPro. More cameras are being introduced. They start offering colors a little bit later on. There's this huge run up, and we all know it. And I'm not going to cover that part, although that is a case study and a great story in itself of what happened over those 6 years from the first digital camera. And what happened was just enthusiasm, and again, a cult brand, a cult following. Everything was absolutely phenomenal. Then I've got the boom here. Well, what's the boom? The boom is life is so incredibly good in 2014, let's go public. It took them a while to get there, but going public, they'll have money. They want to buy some little companies to get editing software. So they had some plans and things to do it. So they go off in 13 and say, let's go public. They would go public in 14. And one of the first things they did as they were going public is they hired a guy named Tony Bates, who was an executive from Microsoft. So now you have Nick, who is this guy, the inventor, and now you have a very credible corporate guy in Tony Bates, who's going to be the president, but report to Nick to give credibility to the team they're assembling to go public. And away they go. But guess what? The going public would be the end of the golden era for GoPro. I'm going to show you what happened as we step into the second part, which is the not so fun and games that happened with the IPO. The IPO goes out, as most IPOs do, to a lot of fanfare. $24 a share, which meant on day one they were worth $3 billion. Well done. However, now they got to announce quarterly reports. They got to keep the drumbeat going, because once you go public, you have to serve that master, which is all the shareholders that own your stock. And GoPro continued to have kind of robust growth and everything. And I'll take a look back here. In 2014, the revenue was 1.4, and then going into 15, the revenue was 1.7. And as that run-up happened, October of 2014, they hit a peak of $98 a share in October of 14. So that was an implied valuation of a little bit over $10 billion. This is a real company now with real value, and more importantly, shareholders and analysts and people that want you to keep the beat going, except that it didn't. In all of their growth and all their spending, there was a few things that went down. Well, let's take a look. So this is the IPO era starting from 14. I'm going to walk you through some financials now. Revenue was 1.4, then in 15, 1.7, so it grew 16%. And by the way, it had grown 41% from 2013 going into 14, which was the part of the kaboom. We're growing 41%. Let's go public and we'll get all this money on the stock market and we'll go buy those little editing companies and those things we want. Okay, hang on. Maybe they should have taken a deep breath at that point, but away they went. Well, 14 to 15 was only 16% growth. You know who was paying attention? The market was paying attention. You turn in a 16% growth, which is less than half the growth rate that you had here, the market starts to get nervous. What they also get nervous about is you had a 45% gross margin. And what gross margin is, most of you know, that's the profit you make selling each product. So you start with your revenue, then the profit you make selling the camera, then you deduct like your operating and people expenses, that's called operating expenses or OPEX, and finally you get to your net. Well, so they were making 45 cents on the dollar when they sold the camera, but then they had 440 million of OPEX and they made 128. Well, as you can see, there were some other things, not just the 16% growth that the market got annoyed with. OPEX jumped to 618 million and the net was only 36 million. It gets worse. The next year they only go 1.7 to 1.18, so their growth was minus 27%, and they spent even more on OPEX. And by the way, it was this time in this era that they had 2 Super Bowl ads. That's right. So if we have all these problems going on, we spend a whole bunch more right here on the OPEX line on Super Bowl ads. If we just advertise more, things will turn around. Now, that may be okay for a young company, but I wanted you to look at something. You've been building this cult brand for 10 freaking years. You don't need a Super Bowl ad to get people's attention. You have a loyal following. You've come off the golden era. People loved it. I had a GoPro. My friends had GoPros that even they put on their kids' ski helmets. And we'd have these amazing little parties where we looked at all their ski footage off a GoPro on the little Tyke's helmet. It was fun. It was great. You need Super Bowl ads to get the world's attention here? No. The answer was you had the money and you spent it on it. I don't think Super Bowl ads pencil out. Well, and they lost $419 million that year, 27% growth, minus 27% growth. And then 2017, which is just closed, it's just an estimate here that came out from some analysts, is that they grow not at all. They've reduced the loss by spending less. And how did they spend less? Well, they laid off 200 people, then 100 people in 2016. Then they laid off 250 people in 2017. Then they told Bates that he can go on the board, but he's not going to be president anymore. So you can see what's going on. And there was something else. You see this little bump here? So the stock went down and came up. Along the way, as this is going down and things are going on with the sale of cameras, they're like, wait a minute. We'll be a media company. Yeah, we'll be a media company. We'll just hire some media executives. And so they went out and they hired from Hulu a woman that was in charge of original content in July of 15. And then they hired the guy that was in charge of HBO Sports in October of 15, said, hey, we're a media company. So the market said, and they gave him a little pop up. But then they started seeing the earnings reports and the results here, and they're like, no. And so it goes all the way down to where it is today, $6 a share, worth about $840 million. Now there is value inside GoPro, because in this era they bought a couple companies and there's real technology assets in those companies. And that would be okay if you were still a private company and you could take those technology assets, maybe put them together and do some things. But as a public company, man, boom, 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 you got to turn in the results. And they had a company that was based in Austin, a company that was based in Paris. They bought them and then they left them in those locations. So how do you bring all of that into the fold and get momentum? So there's a lot of things that went on with the acquisitions that were troubling as well. And it led to where they are today. So where are we today? Nick, just this past week, says, I'm open to selling the company. Now he says he's open to selling the company. Meanwhile, they had already contacted and apparently contracted JP Morgan to sell the company. So saying that you're open to selling when you've already got JP Morgan is like the Kardashian sisters saying, I'm open to dating an NBA player. Who are you kidding? It creates this death spiral. So now you're on this death spiral where, no, we're a media company, we're not a media company, and now we're open to selling because they do have assets to sell. And right now they're worth $840 million. The IPO was $3 billion, so they're sitting there a little more than 1/4 of their IPO value. They've lost almost 75% of their IPO value. So let's go down the death spiral and let's go over here and let's talk a little bit for you and me about strategy. Because we've talked about the history, we talked about the IPO, and we've talked about what's happening right now with Nick and, oh, I'm open to selling. But let's go look at what really happened to Nick. Never mind that, the enthusiasm of all this growth caused them to go public. I think what happened is, as I read things, they got flanked in the camera market. They were the leader, and there were fast followers going to challenge them. 360 cameras came out. Those are everywhere. And 360, they said, well, buy 2 of our cameras, put it together like this, and you get a 360 effect. Whereas other people were putting out single 360 cameras with real trick lenses. That's just one of many things where I think they got flanked. Also, I saw last winter out skiing, I saw kids that had their iPhone sideways in these, I don't know if they're crush proof, but it was a heavy duty case that went on their helmet or up next to their shoulder for like snowboarders. So they were out there actually using iPhones. Not all of them, but everyone that was using an iPhone with some device to do it is no longer using a GoPro. That's a lost GoPro customer. And the iPhone's connected right now with great bandwidth. Androids have bandwidth, so you can upload your pictures right now. Remember the GoPro, you always went back and transferred it to a computer or used Wi-Fi and transferred it someplace. Whereas your iPhone and Android, boom, put it to Facebook right now, put it to Insta right now. So I think they got flanked. They got flack for being flanked on the product side. The second thing, the strategic focus. When you're in the middle of a product issue and you still have some of your IPO money in the bank, you don't suddenly go out and say, I'm going to be a media company and do something else, and I'm just going to hire a bunch of executives. We talked about this. We talked about Blue Apron when they bought that damn ranch. Remember that? Oh yeah, we'll buy a ranch. No, you're a marketing group and you make recipes and you ship food. Those are your core competencies. What were the core competencies of GoPro? Sticking to your roots, envisioning professional quality images coming to you and me through a great little camera. That's your core competency. Not saying, oh, I'm going to make a media company, I'm going to be a content company. No, you're not. Your customers make content with your cameras. So I think that strategic focus was just wrong, and all it did was accelerated the layoffs, a close of divisions of things they bought. And so when I look at this and I see, this here has been a very exciting 4 years, because 2018 right here, so a year. This has been, 4 years. So you took a company that was around 10 years, and then in 4 years you've destroyed everything that was the golden area. It take 10 years to make. And after that, there's only one word for that, and that is damn! You blew it. We loved your cameras. We loved what you were all about. Why didn't you stay with it? You had this brand that was beloved. You had people that loved it. Why didn't you just stay with it and make great cameras and keep us just delighted? Yes, in the era of the iPhone, yes, in the era of competition, but know who you are, stick to your knitting, and don't get distracted. And those are the lesson points for you and me, whether we're operating a t-shirt company downtown or we're lucky enough to start something that's small and we're selling beads out of a microbus and we build a cult following and a great product called GoPro, whether we're lucky enough to have that kind of a run. Stick to your knitting, know who you are, know your competencies, cultivate your competencies, and build that culture where you are. Because a pivot like this, I think basically they may have had a shot to turn it around, but once they go media company and they make that pivot and everything goes, so the market gave you one chance, then it gave you another chance, now the market's giving you no chance. $6 a share, buddy. And that's what's sad. And so now I think we will see the sale of GoPro to somebody, because there are assets and technology things in there, and there is a great little brand. I think somebody will buy it, but I think it needs to go back private, be a private company where, without having to worry about earnings reports and things, that they can go back to doing what they do best. And then maybe they can go knock off one or two of these companies that are making the 360 cameras and all the great stuff that's out there today and make a comeback. I'd love to see it because I remember the GoPro and I remember the joy I had seeing friends and their kids use it. That's this week's case study. And remember, when we get to 1 million subscribers, the first Valuetainment conference led by Patrick Bet-David is gonna happen. So go help it happen, subscribe to this video, and we'll see you with more case studies. I'm Tom Mills with the Biz Doc, and I hope I left you better than I found you.